Hi, it's James. Welcome to episode 5 of the Inversiverse 5.1. In this episode, the aims and objectives of this lecture are: we'll look to extend from episode 4.2, early stages of self-development, by covering the brain maturation process from birth into adulthood and how psychologists test for maturity through each developmental stage, with examples. I'll introduce the schooling system and approaches taken to teaching and learning within the UK and comparisons to the US schooling system, the various models, concepts and theories that are adopted as part of the curriculum. We'll explore manipulation, its definition and meaning, and examples of how others manipulate. We'll cover a brief review of the previous episode's brainwashing and indoctrination, and how tyrannical and fascist governments adopt, implement and integrate these methods into societal brainwashing from school age onwards, with aids of closed-loop systems. How these techniques are utilised to influence and condition individuals, aiding in the formation of their identities and behavioural patterns that corrupt them subconsciously to conform to systematic and enslaved consumer living in the matrix unaware. The maturation of the human mind and brain is a complex process that can be analysed through different psychological frameworks, behaviourism, cognitive development, and Freudian concepts I've included in this presentation. Each offers a unique perspective on how humans grow and develop mentally and emotionally from birth to adulthood. So let's focus on behaviourism, number 1. Behaviourism focuses on observable behaviours and the ways in which these behaviours are learned and shaped by the environment. Early childhood, 0 to 3 years of age. Classical conditioning. Infants learn through association. For example, they may associate a mother's voice with comfort. Number 2. Operant conditioning. Infants and young children learn behaviours through rewards and punishment. Positive reinforcement, such as praise for taking first steps, encourages repetition of the behaviour. Childhood, 3 to 12 years. Social learning. Children observe and imitate behaviours of others, such as parents, peers, and media figures. This is particularly important as they learn social norms and roles. Adolescence, 12 to 18 years of age. Complex learning. As cognitive abilities increase, adolescents can understand and adopt more complex behaviours and social roles. Reinforcement and punishment continue to shape behaviour, but peer influence becomes a significant factor. Adulthood, 18 years of age plus. Behavioural patterns. The behaviour that has been reinforced over the years become habitual. Adults may still learn new behaviours, but these are often influenced by existing habits and routines. Now that we've covered behaviourism, let's look at cognitive development, number 2. Cognitive development looks at how thinking, problem-solving and decision-making abilities evolve. Early childhood, 0 to 3 years of age. Sensorimotor stage, Paget. Infants explore the world through their senses and actions. They develop object permanence and begin to understand cause and effect relationships. Childhood, 3 to 12 years of age. Preo-rational stage. Children develop symbolic thinking and language, but struggle with logic and understanding others' perspectives. Concrete operational stage, 7 to 12 years. Logical thinking develops and children understand concepts like conservation and can perform operations on concrete objects. Adolescence, which is 12 to 18 years of age. Formal operational stage, 12 years plus, which involves abstract thinking develops, allowing for hypothetical reasoning, moral reasoning, and systemic planning. Adulthood, 18 years plus. Cognitive maturity. Adults typically reach their peak cognitive abilities in their 20s and 30s, including abstract thinking, problem solving, and decision making. Cognitive abilities may stabilize or decline slightly with age, but experience and knowledge often compensate for these changes. Now let's look at Freudian concepts, number 3. Freudian theory focuses on the unconscious mind, psychosexual stages, and the development of personality. From the beginning, infancy, 0 to 1 years of age, The oral stage. The focus is on the mouth, and the pleasure comes from activities like sucking and biting. The primary conflict is weaning, which leads to development of trust and comfort. Early childhood, 1 to 3 years of age. This is known as the anal stage. The focus shifts to controlling bowel movements. This stage involves a conflict between autonomy and shame, leading to the development of self-control and independence. Preschool age, which is 3 to 6 years of age. This is known as the phallic stage. The focus is on the genital area, and children experience the oedipus or electra complex, leading to the identification with the same sex, parent, and the development of gender identity. Latency stage. This is between 6 to 12 years of age. Sexual impulses are repressed, and children focus on developing skills and knowledge, forming friendships, and solidifying their sense of self. The adolescent stage, 12 to 18 years of age. This is known as the genital stage. Sexual impulses reawaken, and the focus is on the mature sexual relationships. This stage involves resolving conflicts from earlier stages and develop a well-balanced personality. Adulthood, which is considered from 18 years plus. According to Freud, personality is largely established by adulthood, but unresolved conflicts from earlier stages can influence behavior and relationships. Recommendations and additional key points include: number 1, integration of approaches. Combining these theories provides a more comprehensive understanding. For example, cognitive development influences behavioral learning, and unresolved Freudian conflicts may manifest in observable behaviors. Neuroscientific consideration. Brain maturation involves the growth of neural connections and pruning, especially in areas like the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making and impulse control. Experiences and environment shape brain development significantly, and I'll cover more on this within this episode. The role of environment and culture. Environmental factors such as family dynamics, education and culture play a critical role in shaping cognitive, behavioral and emotional development. Lifespan development. Although these theories focus primarily on childhood and adolescence, human development is lifelong. Adults continue to learn, adapt and change based on new experiences and life challenges. Individual differences is something that we need to consider. Each individual matures at a different pace, influenced by genetic factors, temperament, and personal experiences. Flexibility in expectation and support system is crucial for healthy development, and I'll cover more on this within this episode. Understanding the maturation process from these perspectives allows for a holistic view of human development, emphasizing the interplay between learning, thinking, and emotional growth. The source of this material is courtesy of ChatGPT. So let's now look at some alternative and lesser-known theories in brain maturation. Erik Erikson's psychosocial development theory. Erikson expanded on Freudian ideas by focusing on social and cultural factors and proposing a lifespan model of development. He identified 8 stages of psychosocial development, each characterized by a specific conflict that must be resolved for healthy psychological development. He proposed trust vs mistrust from 0 to 1 years of age. Infants learn to trust caregivers and the environment if their needs are constantly met. Autonomy versus shame and doubt, ages 1 to 3. Toddlers develop a sense of personal control and autonomy by learning to do things for themselves. Initiative versus guilt, ages 3 to 6 years of age. Children begin to assert control and power over their environment through directed play and social interaction. Industry versus inferiority, ages 6 to 12. School-age children develop a sense of pride and competence in their accomplishments. Intimacy versus isolation, ages 18 to 40. Young adults form intimate relationships while balancing independence. Generativity versus stagnation, ages 40 to 65. Middle-aged adults focus on contributing to society and helping the next generation. Integrity versus despair, ages 65 plus. Older adults reflect on their lives, leading to feelings of satisfaction or regret. Alternative perspective. This theory emphasizes social relationships and the ongoing development of identity across the lifespan, contrasting with Freud's focus on early childhood stages. Let's continue to look at number 2, Vygotsky's social cultural theory. Vygotsky's theory emphasizes the role of social interaction and cultural context in cognitive development. He introduced the concept of zone of proximal development, ZPD, which is the gap between what a child can do independently and what they can achieve with guidance and encouragement from a skilled partner. This is broken down as scaffolding. Vygotsky proposed that learning occurs through guided participation, where more knowledgeable than others, such as parents, teachers, or peers, support the learner in tasks slightly beyond their current capabilities. Language and thought. He believed that language plays a crucial role in cognitive development, particularly in shaping thought processes, enabling higher mental functions. Alternative perspective. Vygotsky's approach differs from Paget's by focusing more on social and cultural influences rather than stages of individual cognitive development. Number 3, attachment theory, proposed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. Attachment theory emphasizes the importance of early relationships, particularly between infants and their primary caregivers, in shaping psychological development. Secure attachment. Children with secure attachments tend to explore their environment confidently, using their caregiver as a secure base. Insecure attachment. Variations like anxious avoidant, anxious resistant, or disorganized attachment can lead to difficulties in relationships and emotional regulation later in life. Strange situation test. Mary Ainsworth developed this experimental method to assess the attachment style of infants by observing their reactions to temporary absence of their caregiver. Alternative perspective. This theory highlights the emotional bonds and their impacts on long-term social and emotional development, providing a framework for understanding interpersonal relationships. Number 4, ecological systems theory, proposed by Uri Bronfenbrenner. Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory focuses on multiple environments that influence a child's development. These are namely microsystem, which is immediate environments like family, school, and peers. Mesosystem is interaction between different parts of the microsystem, such as how parental involvement affects school performance. Exosystem, which is external environments that indirectly affect development, such as the parental, workplaces, or community services. Macrosystem, the broader cultural and societal context. Chronosystem, the dimension of time reflecting the importance of life transitions and historical events. Alternative perspectives. This theory emphasizes the importance of context and environment in developing, offering a holistic view that considers how multiple layers of influence interact. Number 5. Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. Gardner proposed that intelligence is not a single, unified concept, but rather consists of multiple intelligences, each representing different ways of processing information. Types of intelligence include linguistic, logical mathematical, spatial, musical, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistic. Educational implications of Gardner's theory suggest that education should be individualized to cater to these different intelligences rather than focusing on a one-size-fits-all approach. The alternative perspective. This theory expands the understanding of cognitive development by recognizing diverse intellectual strengths and proposing that traditional IQ tests may not capture the full range of human abilities. Moral development theory, proposed by Lawrence Kohlberg. Kohlberg extended Paget's work by focusing on moral reasoning, proposing 6 stages of moral development divided into 3 levels. These levels are defined as pre-conventional level. Moral reasoning is based on avoiding punishment and seeking rewards. Conventional level, individuals conform to societal norms and laws, seeking approval from others. Post-conventional level, moral reasoning is based on abstract principles and the recognition of universal ethical values. The alternative perspective of this, the theory provides insight into how individuals develop their sense of morality and ethical reasoning, with an emphasis on the progression through distinct stages of life. And then we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Abraham Maslow proposed a hierarchy of needs, suggesting that human motivation is based on fulfilling a series of needs from the most basic to the more complex. Hierarchy levels include physiological, safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. Self-actualization, Maslow argued, that only when basic needs are met can individuals focus on personal growth and reaching their full potential. The alternative perspective of this theory views human development through the lens of motivation and needs fulfillment, emphasizing the importance of addressing basic needs to achieve higher-level psychological and self-fulfillment goals. Additional considerations of these alternative theories that extend on behaviorism, cognitive development, and Freudian concepts. Neuroscience perspective. Advances in neuroscience provide insight into brain development, showing how experiences shape neural pathways, particularly during critical periods of growth. This perspective can complement psychological theories by offering biological explanations for cognitive and emotional changes. We'll extend on this in the following slides. Cultural perspective. Different cultures have unique views on development, suggesting that theories of maturation should be adapted to reflect cultural context. For example, collectivist cultures may emphasize social roles and community over individual achievement, affecting how identity and maturity are understood. These alternative theories offer diverse perspectives on mind maturation, highlighting the importance of social, cultural, environmental, and individual factors in shaping development. Each theory contributes to a more nuanced and comprehensive understanding of how the human mind grows and matures. Now that we've covered the various theories of brain maturation, expectations of each stage, let's explore which ones are implemented within the UK schooling system in the West and the US. In both the UK and US, various psychological theories are applied at different stages of schooling to guide educational practices, curriculum design, and classroom management. These theories help educators understand how children learn, develop, and behave, ensuring that teaching strategies are age-appropriate and effective. Highlight: if you're being taught what to think instead of how to think, you aren't being educated, you're being indoctrinated. Let's expand on this more. Let's go outside for this one. So, early childhood education, ages 3 to 5. Theories used. 1. Paget's cognitive development theory. Application. Early childhood education often incorporates Paget's concepts, particularly the pre-personal stage. Educators focus on hands-on learning, exploration, and activities that foster symbolic thinking, such as role-playing and using manipulatives for basic math and literacy skills. Example: play-based learning and activities that encourage exploration and curiosity, allowing children to learn through experiences. Vygotsky's social cultural theory. Application: emphasizing the role of social interaction and language in learning. Educators use scaffolding techniques and collaborative learning to help children within their zone of proximal development, ZPD. Example: group activities where children work together with guidance from teachers to complete tasks they could not do alone. Attachment theory, Bowlby and Ainsworth. Application. Understanding the importance of secure attachments. Early childhood programs often emphasize creating a nurturing environment where children feel safe and supported. For an example, building strong teacher-child relationships to provide emotional security and support. Through each stage, different theories of learning are applied. Primary education, ages 5 to 11, incorporate Paget's cognitive development theory. Application. During the concrete operational stages, ages 7 to 11, children develop logical thinking. Primary education emphasizes structured learning activities that encourage logical reasoning and problem solving. For an example, a math lesson that use concrete objects to teach concepts like addition and subtraction, progressing to more abstract ideas as children develop. Number 2, Erikson's psychosocial development theory. Application. In primary school, children are in the industry versus inferiority stage, where they strive for competence and success. Schools emphasize mastery of skills and provide opportunities for achievement and recognition. Example, reward systems, positive reinforcement, and opportunities to showcase achievements, such as school assemblies or class presentations. Number 3, incorporates behaviorism, Skinner and Bandura. Application. Behaviorist principles are often used in classroom management and behavior modification strategies. Positive reinforcement and punishment are used to shape behavior. Example, reward systems like gold stars, house points for good behavior or completed homework, and consequences for not following classroom rules. This may include detention, having to repeat work, staying behind in class. Multiple intelligence theories are also incorporated between primary education ages. Applications such as educators may tailor lessons to address different types of intelligence, ensuring that children have opportunities to learn in ways that suit their strengths. For example, incorporating music, physical activity, and group work into lessons to engage different learning styles. Through each stage, the expected outcomes of learning and work assessment of each student becomes more complex in conjunction with the brain maturation process. The secondary education between the ages of 11 and 18, theories include 1. Paget's development theory. Application. In the formal operational stage from around age 12, students develop the ability to think abstractly and hypothetically. Secondary education involves more complex problem-solving tasks and encourages critical thinking. Example, introducing subjects like algebra, physics, and literature analysis that require abstract thinking. Also incorporates Erikson's psychosocial development theory. Application. Adolescents are in the identity vs role confusion stage, where they explore different identities and roles. Schools provide opportunities for self-expression and exploration of different career paths and personal interests. Example, extracurricular activities, elective courses, and career counselling to help students explore their interest and develop a sense of self-identity. Number 3, Carlsberg moral development theory is also within this age range. As students develop morally, secondary education often includes discussion on ethics, justice, and societal values, encouraging the student to think critically about moral issues. Example, debates on current events, ethical dilemmas in literature classes, or discussion on social justice in history classes. Vygotsky's social theory is incorporated. Application, collaborative learning continues to be important, with an emphasis on peer interaction and social learning. Teachers often use group projects and discussions to deeper understanding. Group projects, peer tutoring, and discussions that build on students' existing knowledge and cultural experiences is an example of such. Social learning is expanded upon through Bandura. Application, secondary education also incorporates social learning theory, recognizing the influence of peer behavior and modeling in shaping student attitudes and behaviors. Example, anti-bullying programs and mentorship schemes where older students serve as role models for younger ones. The more mature the student becomes, the less direct interaction with the teacher/trainer is required, and more complex independent study is encouraged. Further education, post-18. Theories include adult learning theory, androgyny. Application. In further education, colleges and universities, principles of androgyny, adult learning theory, are applied, recognizing that adults are self-directed learners who bring life experiences to their learning. Example, flexible learning schedules, opportunities for self-directed study, and practical, real-world applications of knowledge. Constructivism, Brunner. Application. Constructivist approaches are used to encourage students to build on prior knowledge and engage in discovery learning. Example, research projects, internships, and problem-based learning that require students to actively construct knowledge through experience and inquiry. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is also incorporated at this level. Application. Educators consider students' broader needs, such as providing counseling services, support networks, and a safe learning environment to ensure that students can focus on their learning. Examples, universities offering mental health services, financial aid, and career counseling to support students' overall well-being. Lastly, let's look at the comparisons of each, the UK system and the US system, and explore each stage for how psychologists assess for development. Country-specific applications, the UK. The UK's educational framework is influenced by these theories, with the national curriculum designed to incorporate development stages in cognitive, social, and emotional learning. The early years foundation stage, FEs, and the key stages in primary and secondary education reflect Pagetian and Ericksonian principles, with growing emphasis on personalized learning approaches influenced by Gardner's theory. The US, in comparison, in the US, theories like Paget's cognitive stages and Vygotsky's socio-cultural theory heavily influence the Common Core standards and teaching methods. The emphasis on standardized testing aligns somewhat with behaviorist principles, while project-based learning and differentiated instruction reflect constructivist and multiple intelligences approaches. These theories provide a foundational understanding of student development, guiding educators in both the UK and US in crafting learning experiences that support students' cognitive, social, and emotional growth across different educational stages. Now that we have delved deeper into these subjects, concept models, and theories, let's analyse deeper the schooling system's concepts, theories. Let's look at how that can influence our self-awareness, self-identity, confidence, and ability to interact with others. Psychologists use various methods and tests to assess the development of the human mind and behaviour according to behaviourist, cognitive and Freudian frameworks. Below are examples of how psychologists test for each, along with references to key studies or methods. Behaviorism focuses on observable behaviours and learning processes behind them. Testing in this area often involves experiments or controlled observations. Classical conditioning, example, Pavlov's dog experiment. The test. Ivan Pavlov's famous experiment involved conditioning dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell by pairing the bell with food. This is a classic demonstration of how a neutral stimulus, a bell, can become associated with a natural reflex, salivation, through repeated pairing. Reference, Pavlov's IP 1927, Conditioned Reflexes, an investigation of psychological activity of the cerebral cortex. Behaviorism also attaches to operant condition, example Skinner's box, which was previously mentioned in the previous episode. B.F. Skinner used a Skinner box to study how animals, usually rats or pigeons, learn to perform tasks like pressing a lever in response to rewards, like food, or to avoid punishments, like a mild shock. Reference, Skinner B.F. 1938, The Behaviour of Organisms and Experimental Analysis. Behaviorism continued. Social learning theory. Example, Bandura's Bobo doll experiment. Test. Albert Bandura showed children a film of an adult behaving aggressively toward a Bobo doll. The children who observed aggressive behavior were more likely to imitate it, demonstrating learning through observation. Reference, Bandura A, Ross D, and Ross S.A., 1961, titled Transmission of Aggression Through Imitation of Aggressive Models. Journal of Abnormal and Social Psychology, 63 575-582. Cognitive development is typically assessed through tasks that measure problem solving, logical reasoning, and other mental processes. Sensorimotor stage, Paget's. Example, Objects Permanence Test. Test, Paget tested infants' understanding of object permanence by hiding an object like a toy under a cloth and observing whether the infant would search for it, indicating they knew it still existed even though it was out of sight. Reference, Paget J, 1954, The Construction of Reality in the Child. Pre-perimortal and concrete operational stages. Example, conservation tasks. Test, Paget used tasks where children were shown two identical quantities of liquid in different shaped containers. Children in the pre-operational stage typically believed the taller container had more liquid, while those in the concrete operational stage understood that the quantity remains the same. Reference, Paget J and Inhelder B, 1969, The Psychology of the Child. Formal operational stage. Example, the pendulum task. Test, Paget tested adolescents' ability to think abstractly by asking them to determine what factors affected the speed of a swinging pendulum. Adolescents who can systematically test variables, e.g. length of string, weight, are considered to have reached the formal operational stage. Reference, Paget J, 1972, The Principles of Genetic Epistemology. Freudian concepts are more abstract and are often assessed through projective tasks, clinical interviews, and case studies. Projective tests. Example, Rorschach's ink blot test. The Rorschach test presents individuals with a series of ink blots and asks them what they see. The idea is that people will project their unconscious thoughts and feelings onto the ambiguous stimuli. Reference, Rorschach H, 1921, Psychological Analytic. Case study. Examples, Little Hans. Freud analysed the case of Little Hans, a 5-year-old boy with a phobia of horses. Through detailed interviews and analysis, Freud interpreted this phobia as related to the Oedipus complex and unresolved psychosexual conflicts. Reference, Freud S., 1909, Analysis of a Phobia in a 5-year-old boy. Freudian concepts also include dream analysis, interpretation of dreams. Freud analysed dreams to uncover the unconscious mind's desires, fears, and conflicts. He believed that content of dreams, manifest content, was a disguised version of the latent content, which represented unconscious wishes. Reference, Freud S., 1900, The Interpretation of Dreams. Additional key points and considerations of these alternative theories that build on behaviorism, cognitive development, and Freudian concepts. Ethical considerations. Especially in behavioral experiments, ethical guidelines must be followed to ensure participants' well-being. Validity and reliability. Tests must be reliable, yield consistent results, and valid, actually measure what they claim to measure. Cross-cultural considerations are a factor. Many of these theories and tests were developed in specific cultural contexts and may need adaptation when applied to diverse populations. This also includes the time periods that these tests and theories were hypothesized. Things have drastically changed in over the last 100 years. Integration of methods. A comprehensive understanding of development often requires integrating multiple assessment methods, combining quantitative, e.g. cognitive tests, and qualitative, e.g. clinical interviews approaches. These examples illustrate the diverse methods psychologists use to test theories of behaviorism, cognitive development, and Freudian concepts. Each offers insight into different aspects of human growth and development. We'll look at these further, where I'll conclude with my own thoughts and considerations and experiences, how they can amalgamate together, and how through manipulation these can be corrupted against us through indoctrination and brainwashing, with an example. For this section, I put together a discussion from my life experiences, schooling and higher level tertiary education, perspectives of the UK education system through my years of observation. I had a conversation with ChatGPT. I highlighted the disadvantages of such an education system and how it could be abused to indoctrinate and brainwash people, how positive reinforcement could be actually masked as negative reinforcement, because the models, theories and concepts highlight the direct control of behaviour, which leads individuals to potential self-identity crises. I sought more information on proponents of educational skepticism. Over the coming sections I'll present my findings, including some of the conversational engagement with ChatGPT. We'll also incorporate into this section the final part of the presentation, and that's manipulation, its definition and meaning, and how these models, concepts and theories integrate manipulation into our schooling and life experiences. Before we continue, let's briefly explore manipulation. Manipulation is the act of influencing or controlling someone's thoughts, feelings, or actions in a deceptive, unfair, or exploitative way, often for the manipulator's personal gain or objectives. It typically involves covert tactics rather than open communication. Examples of manipulation include 1. Emotional manipulation. A teacher uses fear or guilt to push a student into compliance, saying, if you don't succeed in this class, you'll be a failure in life. I've had that done to me personally. Number 2, information control. Presenting one-sided information in a lesson to shape students' perspectives without encouraging critical analysis or alternative viewpoints. Number 3, social pressure. Encouraging group conformity by marginalizing dissenting students, creating a culture where independent thinking is discouraged. Behavioral conditioning. Number 4, over-reliance on rewards, stickers, grades, house points, for rote compliance rather than fostering intrinsic motivation, subtly training students to prioritize external validation over personal growth. Number 5, gaslighting. A teacher dismisses a student's valid concerns by saying, you're imagining things or you're overreacting, causing the student to doubt their feelings and perceptions. Manipulation undermines autonomy and can have long-term effects on self-esteem, emotional regulation, and critical thinking abilities. Recognizing and addressing manipulation in educational and personal contexts is vital for fostering healthy relationships and environments. My observations and discussion with ChatGPT. ChatGPT, can you provide a summary of how all these models, concepts and theories could potentially be abused, manipulated, and the disadvantages to students? Through my years of study, through no fault of my own, personality clashes occurred with some teachers. This led me to struggle to seek help with some of my studies. I would prefer to remain silent rather than engage. This had a detrimental effect on my confidence as I grew up. I pose these questions because it is admitted through some of these models and concepts that behaviour is moulded and influenced as part of the curriculum, which obviously can affect an individual's self-identity and self-awareness and place them at a disadvantage rather than promote their growth. My observations are that much, if not most, of these concepts and models directly focus more on rational and logical critical thought. Emotional intelligence plays a lesser role in them. The measures are punitive, yet it is highlighted that emotions do have an effect on our development, and the theories state where observations of behaviour and emotion is assessed. I believe there is a lack in the cross-reference and balance of the two. I believe that emotions and emotional development is not emphasised as much, nor practiced, and emotional intelligence is neglected through these curriculums. Conversation continued. Through these methodologies and actions, it leads potentially to students to become autonomous in their behaviour. My own observations of modern students are, they do not critically think, they do not ask questions, they do not challenge authority, they do not expand on theories, concepts or models, and practically do as they are told. This, in my opinion, isn't conducive to expanding the mind, self-awareness and identity through what is effectively blind compliance to authority. Students are taught to identify what their emotions are, how to control and process emotions. I do not recognise it is highlighted that in post-secondary education there is a focus on safe spaces, etc., counselling. But this occurs when emotional damage has already occurred through these schooling systems, interaction with ignorant and arrogant models and peers within society. The corruption of the heuristic bias, which corrupts an individual's brain to accept new information, forms a cognitive dissonance and brain fog can occur. The inability to think due to conflict of emotions. I believe this emotional imbalance contributes to a stumping of emotions, which leads to destructive behavioural patterns and stops neural pathway development, which in turn debilitates an individual to expand their mind, consciousness and brain maturation. It is actually stumped as the body grows, leading the child to remain and considered to be immature. Lastly, this can leave a child to be lost within their own self-identity, self-awareness, which leads to an individual to close off. When an individual is emotionally stunted, the student is unable to focus the mind and brain to understand, learn and gain new experiences. Is this recognized? To understand and take on new concepts, models of methods of doing tasks and learning is directly hampered if the child is unable to cognitively focus because they remain in a state of fear, worry, panic, anxiety and doubt of internal and external factors. Confidence, morale and mood are directly affected. This imbalance between emotions and rational thought creates a disconnect, as you know as cognitive dissonance. Are you able to recognise that within these models, concepts and theories, how that can be detrimental through all stages of life? We are being correctly nurtured or being turned into biological robots. Finally, let's conclude the presentation with ChatGPT's response and some final words. Your observations raise critical questions about the interplay of rational thought, emotional intelligence, and the potential for educational models and theories to be misapplied in ways that stifle critical thinking and emotional development. Here is a structured response that integrates your points with examples, research, and recommendations. If you're being taught what to think instead of how to think, you're not being educated, you're being indoctrinated. Let's look at the potential abuses and manipulation of educational theories, starting with behaviorism. Description: behaviorism, focusing on rewards and punishment, risks reducing learning to compliance. Students may become conditioned to seek external validation, neglecting intrinsic motivation. Abuse examples: strict reward systems, e.g. gold stars or punitive measures, can create fear and anxiety instead of fostering curiosity. Students might learn to perform for rewards while suppressing emotional engagement or critical thought. Criticism from Alfie Kohn. A critic of behaviorism in education argues that this approach turns students into passive participants, understanding creativity and intrinsic motivations. Social learning theory. Description: while social modelling can be influenced, it can also propagate conformity. Abuse example: encouraging students to emulate authority figures without critical examination can normalise harmful ideologies. For instance, history classes that glorify certain perspectives may inhibit students from questioning societal norms. Criticism: critics point out that overemphasis on modelling can suppress individuality and foster blind obedience. Let's continue on to cognitive development. Paget and Vygotsky's theories. Description: these theories emphasize stages of logical reasoning but may inadvertently neglect emotional development. Abuse example: Paget's rigid stages might cause educators to label students as developmentally behind, creating anxiety. Similarly, misapplied scaffolding from Vygotsky's theory can infantilize students by over-directing their learning. Criticism: theories that prioritize cognitive milestones risk sidelining emotional growth. leading to students who excel intellectually but struggle emotionally. Attachment theory. Description. Secure attachment is foundational for emotional and social development, yet attachment theory is vulnerable to misinterpretation. Abuse example. Schools that fail to provide emotionally supportive environments due to rigid curricula or indifferent educators can exacerbate insecurities, especially in students with difficult home lives. Criticism. John Holt, an advocate for homeschooling, criticized traditional schooling for its failure to nurture emotional security, often leaving children feeling alienated. The negatives and disadvantages of alternative theories shown in this presentation. Moral development, Kohlberg. Description. Kohlberg's focus on moral reasoning stages often exclude emotional dimensions like empathy. Abuse example. Educators focusing solely on abstract ethical dilemmas may fail to address real-world emotional implications, leading students to view morality as theoretical rather than relational. Criticism. Carol Gilligan, a feminist scholar, argued that Kohlberg's theory undervalues emotional factors like care and compassion, disproportionately affecting how boys and girls are taught. Multiple intelligences, Gardner's theory. Description. Gardner's framework aims to celebrate diverse strengths, but can be misused to label or pigeonhole students. Abuse example. Schools might focus disproportionately on testable intelligences, such as linguistics and logical mathematical skills, sidelining interpersonal or emotional intelligences. Criticism. Gardner himself cautioned against the misuse of his theory to limit students rather than broadening opportunities. And finally, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Description. While Maslow's framework acknowledges emotional needs, the implementation may prioritize basic needs at the expense of higher-level growth. Abuse example. A lack of resources for emotional well-being, e.g. counseling and safe spaces, can hinder students from progressing beyond basic survival to self-actualization. Criticism. Critics argue that hierarchical models oversimplify complex need, ignoring the interplay of emotions and rational thought. Let's look at how these negative elements of these theories may affect and impact individuals across life stages and modern observations. Childhood, 0 to 12. Emotional neglect during these formative years, often due to behaviourist or rigid cognitive approaches, may lead to fear and anxiety. A child fixated on avoiding punishment may struggle to develop self-confidence or curiosity. Adolescence, 12 to 18. Inadequate emotional support and overemphasis on conformity may lead to identity crises. Emotional stunting can create reliance on external validation, hampering independence. Adulthood, ages 18 to 60. Cognitive dissonance stemming from unresolved emotional conflicts can lead to burnout, poor decision-making, or avoidance of self-reflection. Elderly, 60 plus. Emotional detachment cultivated during early stages may result in regret and despair, as Erikson's final stage suggests. Modern observations. Studies suggest that current educational systems often fail to balance emotional and intellectual growth. Cognitive dissonance. Overload curricula prioritize rote memorization, leaving little room for emotional exploration or critical questioning. This creates brain fog and emotional disconnect. Emotional intelligence neglect. Research by Goldman, 1995, highlights the significant role of emotional intelligence in life success, yet schools rarely teach emotional regulation or interpersonal skills. The compliance culture. Observation indicates that many students avoid challenging authority, conforming to systems that suppress individuality and self-expression. Recommendations on improving the education system. Number 1. Integrate emotional intelligence, EI, into curricula. Develop programs focused on emotional awareness, self-regulation, and empathy. Useful mindfulness practices and reflective exercises to help students process emotions. Number 2. Foster critical thinking and autonomy. Encourage open discussions, debates, and problem-based learning to cultivate questioning and independent thought. Avoid over-reliance on behaviourist methods. Instead, promote intrinsic motivation. Number 3. provide safe emotional spaces, create supportive environments where students feel secure to express themselves, train educators in emotional literacy to better understand and support students' needs. And that's not to be dismissive and for allowing others to bully other individuals. Number 4, balance rationale and emotional development. Incorporate activities that blend cognitive challenges with emotional engagement, such as role-playing real-world dilemmas. Number 5, monitor and evaluate educational practices. Regularly assess the emotional and intellectual outcomes of educational strategies. Encourage feedback from students to address emotional and intellectual needs. And lastly, number 6, promote lifelong emotional growth. Extend emotional education beyond childhood, addressing the needs of adults and seniors. Before we fully conclude, let's look at how cognitive and emotional development may be stunted for students. And I believe many students suffer this as an intentional result of the education systems within the UK and the US. Some students handle the processes and pressures of learning with greater stability and more ease than others. It's not a lack of intelligence. Have you ever wondered why? Have you heard or read within your own school reports? If only James could focus and concentrate, he'd do so much better in school with his grades. He fails his tests but does so well in his assignments. We don't understand why. That's an example one from my reports at an early age. There's a reason some struggle to learn even when they display traits of being highly intelligent, and this is overlooked by many teachers, educators, because they aren't trained to understand or recognise it. It isn't conducive to a manipulative education system and recognising brainwashing and indoctrination. That's why it's ignored. If you were more stable, individuals would recognise the corrupt government agendas. They would understand the manipulation of being taught what to think rather than how to think. The emotional disconnect which stunts development through the educational system is known as corruption of the heuristic bias and its impacts on the brain. It highly impacts some individuals more than others due to many aspects, such as difficult home life, personal relationships with trainers and teachers, the inability to cope when under pressure and stress to perform, and additional elements such as dietary requirements of the brain. Or, for example, if you're already impacted by emotional issues, it makes it difficult for some to learn, which can confine these individuals inadvertently to an immature mindset, and physical brain development is stunted. Over the coming slides, I'm going to present in greater detail so that it can help you learn and recognize it in others. The corruption of the heuristic bias and its impact on the brain. Heuristic biases are mental shortcuts or rule of thumb that the brain uses to simplify decision-making and problem-solving. While heuristics are necessary for efficiency in processing vast amounts of information, their misuse or corruption, especially in educational and societal systems, can profoundly affect brain development and function. Here's an expanded analysis of how this occurs, its neuroscience underpinnings and its implications. Understanding heuristic bias and corruption. Number 1. Definition and role of heuristics. Heuristics such as the availability or confirmation bias are strategies the brain uses to make quick decisions with limited information. These biases are shaped by experience, education, and environment. However, when these inputs are manipulated, intentionally or otherwise, heuristic biases can become maladaptive. Number 2. Corruption of the heuristic bias. Misinformation and indoctrination. When students are repeatedly exposed to one-sided information, their heuristics adapt to conform to that perspective, confirmation bias. Over time, this limits critical thinking and openness to new ideas. Over-reliance on authority. Students may develop a heuristic that authority is always correct, reducing their ability to question or analyze. This has recently been displayed in the media through the projection of misinformation and individuals calling out and crying, "Oh, that's a conspiracy." These individuals will only listen to one perspective of a two-sided story. This is a prime example of the corruption of the heuristic bias. Fear and emotional manipulation. Fear-based teaching or punitive environments can condition students to associate learning with stress, leading to avoidance and anxiety-driven heuristics. Let's look at the neuroscience perspective. how it affects the brain through the maturation process. Corruption of the heuristic bias has profound implications for brain function and development. Below are the key mechanisms involved. Number 1. Neural pathways and plasticity. Impact. The brain's plasticity allows it to adapt to repetitive stimuli and experiences. When corrupted heuristics dominate, the neural pathways associated with these biases are reinforced, while alternative pathways atrophy. Example. If a student is consistently discouraged from questioning authority, neural circuits for critical thinking, prefrontal cortex, weaken, while the circuits for compliance and habit-based thinking, basal ganglia, become dominant. Cognitive load and stress. Impacts. Environment that manipulate heuristics through fear or punishment activate the brain's stress response through the amygdala. Chronic stress reduces the brain's capacity for higher order thinking, decision making, and emotional regulation. This is highly recognizable in individuals who accept the mainstream narrative. When they are being questioned about the logic and reason of the decision making, they become extremely stressed through cognitive dissonance. Neuroscience. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for logic and planning, is impaired under stress, while the amygdala becomes hyperactive, leading to impulsive or fear-driven decisions. Number 3. The dopaminergic system. Impacts. Heuristic corruption often involves rewards or punishment. This manipulation of the brain's dopamine system, reinforcing compliance and discouraging exploratory behaviour. Neuroscience. Dopamine release, tied to reward systems, shapes learning and motivation. When used manipulatively, rewarding conformity, it conditions the brain to associate specific behaviours with safety, bypassing critical evaluation. For example, you are demonized if you do not take a vaccination by your peers. They are bypassing critical evaluation because they're seeking safety. Long-term effects of brain maturation. Impact. Over time, reliance on corrupted heuristics can inhibit the maturation of the prefrontal cortex, crucial for executive functions like problem-solving, ethical reasoning, and self-regulation. Neuroscience. A study on cognitive dissonance and neural activation found that when individuals are forced to reconcile conflicting information, areas like the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, and the prefrontal cortex are engaged. However, repetitive bias conditioning reduces the brain's ability to process dissonance, stunting its capacity for adaptive thinking. And that's what they have done with millions of people through repetitive news cycles inducing and driving fear. Understanding heuristic bias in education. Psychological and cognitive outcomes. The corruption of the heuristic bias and its impact on the brain function leads to several negative outcomes. Cognitive dissonance and brain fog. Explanation. Conflicting internal beliefs, e.g. between that is taught and what is felt, activate the ACC, causing discomfort. When heuristics suppress this discomfort, i.e. don't question authority, cognitive dissonance is left unresolved. Outcome. Chronic unresolved dissonance can lead to brain fog, where the individual struggles to focus, think clearly, or process new information. Emotional stunting. Number 2. Explanation. By prioritizing rote learning and compliance over emotional development, corrupted heuristics diminish the brain's ability to process and regulate emotions effectively. Outcome. Students may suppress emotions, leading to anxiety, depression, and an inability to navigate interpersonal relationships. Number 3. Reduced neurogenesis and learning capacity. Explanation. Stress and limited intellectual challenges suppress neurogenesis, which is the creation of new neurons, particularly in the hippocampus, essential for memory and learning. Outcome. This stunts cognitive growth, leaving individuals less capable of integrating new information or adapting to novel situations. Number 4. Loss of identity and autonomy. Explanation. When heuristics prioritize conformity and suppress individuality, students fail to develop a sense of self-awareness or autonomy. Outcome. This leads to dependence on external validation and a weakened ability to define personal beliefs, goals, or values. Recommendations for addressing heuristic bias and emotional imbalance. Number 1. Promote emotional intelligence. Introduce explicit curricula on identifying and regulating emotions using frameworks like Goleman's emotional intelligence model. Incorporate reflective practices such as journaling or mindfulness to help students process emotions. Number 2. Encourage critical thinking and dissonance resolution. Create safe environments for students to question, debate, and explore different diverse perspectives. Use teaching methods that challenge existing biases, such as the Socratic questioning or interdisciplinary learning. Number 3. Focus on brain health. Incorporate stress reduction techniques, e.g. mindfulness, exercise, into daily routines to counteract the effects of chronic stress on the brain. Design curricula that balances cognitive and emotional development, ensuring both the prefrontal cortex and limbic system are engaged. Number 4. Avoid over-reliance on reward systems. Shift from behaviourist incentives to intrinsic motivators, fostering curiosity and passion for learning rather than compliance. Number 5. Empower educators. Provide training in neuroscience, emotional intelligence, and bias awareness to ensure educators support holistic development. Key skeptics of educational system of past and present. Key critics in skepticism. Number 1. John Taylor Gatto in the US. Gatto criticized the public education system for creating obedient workers rather than independent thinkers. He argued that curricula often suppress creativity and critical thought to maintain societal conformity. Ken Robinson within the UK. Robinson highlighted the lack of emphasis on emotional intelligence and creativity in traditional education, arguing that systems prioritize standardized testing over holistic development. Paulo Freire. Although more global, Freire's concept of the banking model of education criticizes approaches where students are passive recipients of information, which limits critical thinking and reinforces power imbalances. Number 4. Alfie Kuhn, US. Kuhn's work emphasizes the dangers of behaviorist approaches, asserting that reward systems manipulate students into compliance, discouraging intrinsic motivations. In conclusion, the theories and models in education, such as behaviorism, cognitive development, and social learning, while foundational, can be misapplied, leading to manipulation and hindering critical thinking. Behaviorist practice often focus on compliance through rewards and punishment, risking suppression of curiosity and intrinsic motivation. Cognitive theories may overemphasize logic at the expense of emotional development, leaving students ill-equipped to process or regulate emotions. These approaches, combined with lack of focus on emotional intelligence, contribute to blind conformity, undermining self-awareness and individuality. From a neuroscience perspective, such practices reinforce maladaptive heuristic biases, mental shortcuts that simply define decision-making. When corrupted by indoctrination or fear-based learning, these biases create cognitive dissonance, brain fog, and reduce neurogenesis, impairing the brain's capacity for critical thinking and adaptation. Chronic stress from punitive systems hyperactivates the amygdala while weakening the prefrontal cortex, stunting emotional and intellectual growth. Over time, this imbalance disrupts neural pathway development, leaving individuals emotionally and cognitively stunted. Critics like John Taylor Gatto and Ken Robinson argue that education systems prioritize conformity and standardize outcomes over creativity and holistic development. Emotional intelligence, a vital aspect of brain maturation, is often sidelined, with students left unprepared to navigate interpersonal challenges or process complex emotions. To nurture balanced growth, educational systems must integrate emotional intelligence training, fostering intrinsic motivation, create safe space for critical questioning, ensuring students become independent thinkers and emotionally resilient individuals. That's a wrap for this episode. Episode 5. Let's look at what has been covered in this episode of the Inversiverse. I do hope it all makes sense. Let's conclude with what has been presented. We extended from episode 4.2 and delved deeper into the brain maturation process, from birth into adulthood and later life, 60 years plus. We looked at how maturity is measured and assessed through each developmental stage of life, the various models, concepts and theories applied through each stage. We looked at how these theories, models and concepts are applied within the UK and US schooling systems, with focus on behaviourism, cognitive development, Freudian concepts and lesser-known models, theories and concepts that are integrated within societal and school learning. We explored manipulation and a disadvantage to students where the schooling system can be negative and detrimental to growth, how the schooling system can be used to indoctrinate and brainwash rather than teach individuals to think and lead for themselves. We explored heuristic biases and how maladaptive schooling can in fact lead to stunted mental growth and maturation of the brain through corruption of the heuristic bias, and how that is achieved unknown to individuals and the reasons why. Suggestions of how it can be overcome by the student, adult, stroke individual. I included some personal experiences and examples. We looked at skeptics of the schooling system and those opposed to various models and concepts and theories, and recommendations to improve learning environments and the education system as a whole. Thank you for your time and attention. Bye for now. See you in the next episode, James.